Aloha and welcome to Island Connections. I'm Ibrahim Aoude. Learning through community engagement is our topic for the day. Three guests that we have here at the studios. Ulla Hasager, she's Director of Civic Engagement for College of Social Sciences at Mānoa. And Bonnie Kahape'a-Tanner, she is the founder of Kānehūnāmoku Voyaging Academy, and she is also the leader of that academy. She's an educator and also a voyaging captain. And then Kat Lobendahn, she's a student of Civic Engagement Program Assistant at UHM. So welcome to you all, and thank you really for coming over to help us understand civic engagement and community relationship with the university and so forth. So I would like to first ask Bonnie to say more about yourself and about how you got around to being a captain and also in the Voyaging Academy.
Okay, aloha. Really back in, I guess my story of voyaging really starts probably earlier than I think. When I was growing up, my dad would, take us fishing, and it necessarily wasn't something we really enjoyed, but we went. And then when I got into college, started doing more on the water. But it was really in 1995 when I first stepped foot aboard the Makali'i, where I really thought I found my passion there, and I kind of say that I never really got off the deck of that canoe since then. Yeah. So it's been, just about 20 years that I've been sailing, and was fortunate enough to be on the crew in 1999 on the voyaging canoe Makali'i to sail Master Navigator Maupiai home to Saddlewall. And his one request to the crew then was to return home and to share our experience and what our knowledge that we had gained on the voyage with him, with the people back in Hawaii. And so shortly after our return home in 1999, charter schools were just forming, and the charter school Halau Kumana was actually here at the university campus. This is where we started, and we got a grant to build a small double-hull sailing canoe. And from there, we have now since developed the Kānehūnāmoku Voyaging Academy.
Yeah, wonderful. And Kat, what's your relationship to the Pacific and also to
the relationship to the Pacific? I'm originally from Fiji, Suva, Fiji, of Tongan and Samoan ancestry. How I got involved with Kahape'a and Kānehūnāmoku was I first met her, I think it was the spring of 2012. There was the Pacific Connections Forum, and I met her there. And then later that fall, there was a pilot project called Kaholova'a, which I was involved in. It was founded by Willie Kauai, as well as Kahape'a and Professor Hasager. And then just last year, Willie, was working on his PhD, so I stepped in to coordinate that program, and it's just been a wonderful relationship. And then the course of last year, Kahape'a said, hey, Hokulea, they're going to be sailing to Tonga on the Worldwide Voyage, and it just sparked this, an immediate I have to go kind of thing, and all my fears just kind of went out the window, and been training with the Polynesian Voyaging Society in preparation for that.
Yeah, so it's like one thing leading to another, and all of a sudden you find yourself in the midst of things, and you're enjoying it and contributing to the community in terms of engagement and education and so forth. So Ulla, as the Director of Civic Engagement at University of Hawaii, Mānoa College of Social Sciences, what would such programs, and how do they relate to what you are doing, and what would they do in terms of the students' engagement in the community, from your experiences so far?
Well, the UH system is land grant, and as such, we do have a responsibility to work in and with the community. And it's also, the university is forwarding itself as a Hawaiian place of learning, so we need to have a strong focus in that area. I'm ethnic studies faculty, and as such, I felt a big responsibility to address the issue of Micronesian stereotyping and discrimination in Hawaii, and put in a small grant proposal in 2011. I got a seed grant for a forum that we then called Micronesian Connections. And Willie was a GA in our department at that time, so he and I worked together on it, and he brought Kahape'a in to help us establish and kind of strengthen positive relations between ethnic groups in Hawaii. So we held this forum, as Kat mentioned, in 2012, and it was very amazingly well attended. And Kahape'a and Kat and Willie and I started talking about how we could kind of expand this in a daily activity with students to increase their understanding and their respect for Pacific Island cultures.
So actually the voyaging experience and the canoe itself, not only does it contribute to the question of like connecting peoples together in the Pacific Islanders, but also especially through like Papa Māopi'alug, he's like, you know, for Hawaii, he's like the symbol of Micronesia and the relationship between Hawaii and Micronesia. And so in doing so, the Hawaiians recognize like that the Micronesians are, you know, their brothers and sisters, so to speak, in terms of the Pacific Ocean. So it contributes then to the question of good ethnic relations and like, you know, not to discriminate against Micronesians in Hawaii and see the relationship between all Pacific Islanders. Is that what I understand from what you folks are doing? Would you like to elaborate on this?
Yeah, so, you know, as a voyaging community, we're all very aware that Māopi'alug, without him in the 70s and even all the way throughout until his passing, he was, you know, our beacon of light, and he was able to give back to the Hawaiians and the rest of the Pacific voyagers our identity as navigators, as people of the sea, and we want to expand that awareness out beyond just the voyaging community, but into the Hawaiian community and the general population in Hawaii, that this one single person that came from this tiny island in the middle of Micronesia had this amazing and lasting impact on the world. And how do we now in Hawaii acknowledge that and then turn that acknowledgement into ways to help his people, the Micronesian people, have better lifestyles here in Hawaii, you know, and try to understand more of their culture beyond just the voyaging culture.
Right, yeah. So what I'm gonna do now, like there's a 6-minute video I'd like to show about what we have been talking about, and then maybe we can all comment on that, yeah. Okay, I'll just start it.
In 2014, the Polynesian Voyaging Society and the voyaging canoe Hokulea will embark on a voyage around the world. A 47,000-mile, 36-month voyage to 24 countries with 68 planned landfalls. We sail for peace, for the love of our planet, and with the desire to leave the children of the world a hopeful, healthy future. To understand Hokulea is to go back in time, to the origin of Polynesia itself.
Goes back 7,000 years ago, where the first really oceanic people came out of China, and it came out of Taiwan. 1,000 years after that, spreading through the Pacific Islands in Melanesia, even in Indonesia. Then you get to Polynesia, this oceanic country bounded by Hawaii in the north and New Zealand in the southwest. and Rapa Nui in the east. 10 million square miles, 600 times more water than this land, biggest country on earth, bigger than Russia. And it was discovered by these extraordinary people. And I say extraordinary because you could argue that they were really the astronauts of our ancestors. They were the greatest explorers on the face of the earth.
Today, as we struggle with the depletion of natural resources, the degradation of our land, heavens and oceans, and conflicts that result from overconsumption, we believe that ancient wisdom can and will inspire contemporary solutions. Since her launching in 1975, Hokulea has sailed 135,000 nautical miles throughout Polynesia to Micronesia, Japan, and the west coast of the continental United States. What began as an effort to disprove critics who doubted Polynesians' ability to sail purposefully, unaided by navigational instruments, has grown into a cultural reawakening, a living commitment to sustainability, and a movement to bring experiential, value-based, community-grounded education to the forefront.
As the Hawaiian culture is re-emerging, rediscovering, re-strengthening, that's not a common story around the world. That is a story that is unique. There are cultures and languages that have been lost every single day across this planet. This voyage intentionally is supposed to honor, it's supposed to celebrate, and it's supposed to strengthen all cultures on the planet by respecting them.
Lehua Kamalu is one of the Polynesian Voyaging Society's emerging young navigators.
We wouldn't be here today if our ancestors didn't figure out how to live in balance with their environment and with these islands. There is a lesson in going back to traditional practices and finding some way of bridging the gap between what is modern and ancient and making life livable and healthy and safe.
Ka'iulani Murphy has been sailing on Hokulea since 1997 and is one of very few crew members who will sail on the first international leg to Tahiti.
This is a critical time for us. A lot of people are realizing that because of things that we've done to the planet, to our oceans, the land in the past, that just affects our ability to have oxygen to breathe. And so it's not limited to somebody in Hawaii. It affects everybody that breathes. Along with building better relationships with people around the world who have the same desire to take care of our planet, you know, we're part of a movement. To have leaders, peace leaders really, with the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, to recognize that there is something special about Hokulea, special to us, and I think it does bring that kind of worldwide attention that we are on the right path and we are something that can carry that message of peace around the world.
The investment is not an investment for a monetary reward at the end. You're not going to cash in on this and say, all right, now I have this much money. It's an investment in the earth. It's an investment in the future. It's an investment in keeping traditions and resources and knowledge and learning alive for the future generations.
If you come from the lens of what the canoe is supposed to do, it will do nothing if we're tied to the dock. We're not going to change the world, but we're going to go and build a network of people around the earth who are going to change it. And our job is to help them be successful.
Well, any comments, Bonnie? Kahape'a?
Yeah, the Worldwide Voyage is an amazing, amazing undertaking by the Polynesian Voyaging Society. I just recently came back from Hokulea, sailed about 1,000 miles between the Cook Islands and Samoa. And it's just an amazing experience to reconnect to the islands that Hokulea has been to by some of our crew members, you know, the leaders that are there today. So it was an amazing time.
So you've been educating a lot of people in terms of sailing, navigating, experiencing the Pacific in ways not through like United Airlines going somewhere.
Yeah, our program with Kānehūnāmoku Voyaging Academy reaches out to learners of all ages, but primarily students in school age. And we take students out all the time on our little canoe. She's only 29 feet long, but we see close to about 1,500 students a year.
All right, wow, yeah.
I just wanted to add to something Kahape'a said earlier, talking about Papa Mau, and I don't hear it often, but I'd like to reiterate the importance of this man to voyaging, not just in Hawaii, but throughout, you know, through the Polynesian Voyaging Society. It's encouraged a lot of other Pacific islands to, you know, go back to their roots of navigation. And, you know, if you think about it, Ibrahim, Hawaii has 5 po navigators, 5 master navigators. So these are 5 Hawaiian master navigators that's carrying a Micronesian title to being a master navigator. And so it makes no sense, a lot of the racism that's happening towards a lot of the Micronesian people, because 5 of Hawaii's sons carry Micronesian titles, you know, and this is huge. This is part of Mau's legacy. For me personally, the survival of Polynesian Voyaging Society is part of Mau's legacy. The Worldwide Voyage, in my opinion, is part of Mau's legacy, because if he hadn't, you know, stepped out of his comfort zone to teach the Hawaiians, we wouldn't be having this conversation today concerning voyaging, and who knows what might have happened to, you know, Polynesian Voyaging Society or Hokulea. So it's important that people understand. It's unfortunate it's not common knowledge what he's done. As like Kahape'a referred to, unless you're in the Voyaging Society, you don't know much about this guy. And I think there's just not enough done to really emphasize the gift he has given Hawaii. It's enormous, you know.
Yeah.
And
he had sacrificed a lot, you know, to educate Hawaiians in terms of navigation. So it's a wonderful thing. And now I think his son is also helping out these days.
So one of his sons, Placito, has been in Hawaii for about 2 years. And so once I met him, we started engaging him in a lot of our educational programs. And so we're just starting a new project, and we'll be building a small Micronesian canoe that he will be the leader on that project. And we're going to bring together students, Hawaiian students, Micronesian students, Pacific Islanders. It's really open to anybody that wants to be involved. It's just a little project, but we're trying to see if we can get young people together to work together, and then hopefully start to talk about some of their feelings and some of their maybe fears, and about living in Hawaii and how are we all gonna get along.
Yeah, and what impressed me about the 6-minute video actually, and I'd like to hear your comments on this. Like we talk always, like especially at the university, about globalization and all that, and we think it's like through trade and investment and all of that, which is that is happening, of course, but also here we have like a small group of people, you know, in the Hawaiian Islands that have embarked on an important like trek, shall we say. Like seeking global peace and connecting with other ethnicities, nationalities, etc. And so there, to me, there are multiple lessons to be drawn from just this kind of engagement, and this kind of project. So it's trying to bring the world together, you know, as Nainoa Thompson said, bring the world together. It's not like you change the world, but you know, give or contribute to the peoples coming together so they could change the world. So in terms of education and engagement between the university and the community, how would you look at all that kind of adventures, adventures, not one, but multiple, yeah.
Well, it's a tremendous teaching moment right now, and from my perspective, arranging teaching and learning experiences in the College of Social Sciences, it's such a tremendous gift to have the collaboration of Kahape'a and CAT. Talking about globalization, I think you coined a term called globalness. Looking at globalness instead of globalization. I refer to this book here. And there are multiple reasons for referring to this book. The other one is that we have a strong component of our community and our academic community that are really looking for visions for the future. And this particular book is looking into oceanic lessons for the future. So it's so much in line with what we are doing now, and there's so much energy and knowledge behind it. Yeah. So I'm very optimistic in creating change in that sense. But of course, a canoe traveling around the world is a way of creating international connections, which we do a lot in civic engagement with students coming here, students going away. But it's such a gift for a teaching situation.
And I'm thinking also not only in terms of connecting Pacific Islanders or other peoples together, but one of the lessons in terms of is very important to the Pacific Islanders and to everyone else, the question of climate change, environmental degradation, and all of that. So perhaps Pacific Island cultures can teach something to the world in terms of preservation, conservation, trying to kind of at least check this, let's say, global warming thing or environmental degradation, if not reverse it, etc. So any comments on those particular issues, Bonnie?
Well, the theme of the voyage is Malama Honua, which is taking care of island Earth. And so it's a good thing that it's starting from Hawaii, because there's a lot of islands in the Pacific that are threatened with rising sea levels based on climate change. Right. There's a few islands in the Indian Ocean, which the canoes will voyage to those areas. And it's just bringing the awareness on what can we do to sustain, the voyage is going to offer some solutions, and also learn some solutions from what other countries are doing to taking care of their own backyard. And hopefully collectively, everybody's engaged. It's like Kaiulani said it matters to anybody that breathes. So if you're breathing, you need to be concerned about this.
Yeah, and I like your T-shirt, sustainability, island thinking, and there is the aina right there, and sustainability.
I didn't think about it. It wasn't planned this way.
No, but anyway, I mean, I just comment on it. Kahape'a, any more on that?
Just similar to what Kat said, a lot of the islands that the canoe has visited and that the canoe will go to are islands that are all going to be affected by climate change a lot sooner than Hawaii. In the terms of these islands, a lot of them are already low-lying atolls, and they're already seeing some effects. And so as people need to move away from their islands, where do they go? They're going to end up going to more of the urban centers. Hawaii is one of them in the Pacific, and then we're going to have to face these social challenges. So again, it's all going to come back to how can we live together, and the canoe is a great metaphor and a physical example that we can use today. And that's why the canoe is so magical, because it does allow people to come together in a small space and to learn, but create a community. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you just came back from a trip, right? Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
I was part of the Leg 2, so it actually started in Tahiti, and they took the canoe through the islands of Tahiti to the Cook Islands. and then up to American Samoa. I actually joined them halfway through, so I flew into the Cook Islands and met them. But that section of the Worldwide Voyage was about reconnecting. Hokulea had been there in the 80s and in the 90s.
Right.
And a lot of Hokulea's earlier voyages there have inspired those communities to take up the voyaging traditions again, and many canoes have been built since then.
Kat, and you're gonna take part in this.
Right.
Could you say more about
I've been fortunate to be selected or be a candidate for the what is called Leg 5, which is from American Samoa, Pango to Aotearoa, stopping off in 2 islands in Tonga, and in Vava'u first, and then Tongatapu, and I will be hopping off in Tongatapu, and then rejoin the crew in New Zealand. I just wanted to add also, Ibrahim, when recently I went to Tonga in August, and we stopped off first in Christmas Island, and as we flew over, I could clearly see climate change. It was like, it just hit me instantly. A lot of the islands were underwater, and the same thing, some of the islands I noticed in the Tonga group were clearly underwater, and you could see at one time they were well above surface, but they're sinking pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a huge thing. And as you mentioned, where would they go, these people? In the islands, Tuvalu and so forth. So they have to go somewhere. It's the higher islands, like, Hawaii. Yeah, so that is a problem, it seems to me. So any more on that, Ulla?
Climate change. We already connect these things in various ways. So, for instance, the forum I talked about that was established in 2012 was initiated by Ethnic Studies, but took place in collaboration with Center for Pacific Island Studies. And we have continued that collaboration. So in 2013, we put our energy in that context into bringing about 40 students from Kaimuki High School, mostly Pacific Islanders, and mostly students that were part of a IMUA program, which are students that are struggling in various ways. We brought them into an international climate change conference that was put up by Center for Pacific Island Studies, and these high school students played an active role in the climate change conference, but they were also integrated in the Kahuluva'a program, and they had a chance to experience sailing on Kānehūnāmoku and help prepare Hokulea. Was it Hokulea they were working on?
They did some Hawaii law.
Yeah,
They did some
dry dock work. So they kind of became part of this. Then this year we had another forum, and we're developing, right? So we started Micronesian Connections, but realized that should really be Oceanic Connections, where we followed up on these things.
Yeah, this year, right?
Yeah, this year. But regarding climate change, the United Nations are pushing a lot to create change in that area, and trying to incorporate Indigenous people's perspectives. So they have had large sections that are dealing with Indigenous knowledge, and very often, in my experience working with the United Nations, the reports are generated and not so much action is taken. But actually, Hokulea managed to land in Apia, at a time where they had the Small Islands meeting for the United Nations, and make strong connections with Ban Ki-moon that was on board the canoe. So hopefully the delegates from the United Nations will acknowledge that they have wisdom right there. There's a film clip online where you see the crew members of Hokulea and Hikianalia sit in discussion groups with UN representatives. So maybe we can move on to actually acting on all this knowledge. But there's definitely, at least on paper, a commitment to learning from Indigenous communities and to integrate that knowledge in planning for the future.
Kahape'a, can you say something more about the Kānehūnāmoku program, the academy? What kind of students go there? What exactly do they do on land, on the
Sure.
Yeah.
We have students from all ages, so even starting from preschool, we have preschool classes that come, and they come on the canoe and they get to learn all the parts and just to be able to feel the canoe. What does it feel like to be on the ocean? And then we also teach them different things, protocol, different chants, songs about the canoes. And the star compass is one of our main lessons that we like to teach. And we like to actually teach the Micronesian star compass as well as the Hawaiian star compass to get that perspective. But that happens for kids all the way from preschool all the way up to college level, like the Koholova'a program. And we put them through, the older students, probably middle school and up, they go through more of a training program if that's what they want, where they have to do the swim test, which is all the same standards that all the voyaging societies hold. So they do a swim test, and then the best part is getting to sail and having that experience, and again creating that community or that crew. And then and then if students want to learn more, like we currently have a new program where we're trying to get local kids interested in the maritime industry, so that not only is voyaging a passion and a way to perpetuate your culture, but it could also lead to career, good career choices. And the Hawaiians were noted back in the whaling days to be excellent seamen, and through there, a lot of our our kupuna are now retiring from the maritime industry, and they weren't seeing the new generations coming up into those higher level positions of captains and engineers. And so this project is a pilot project right now, but we're hoping it's gonna stick around for a long time and really try and get a new generations of young people out on the ocean.
Yeah. And Kat, you work also with Palola students, right?
Right. I work in the Palola, it's called the Palola Pipeline program through the College of Social Sciences. I mostly work with the Micronesian, Pacific Island students, the Micronesian children, other Polynesian children, including the Hawaiians. And I always love using the metaphor of the canoe, when they're engaging each other, and just whether we're in a classroom or just in one of the learning centers. And I just kind of paint the picture for them to imagine that we were all actually in a canoe. And it's about strengthening the relationships with one another, because you have to trust one another, and heaven forbid somebody fell off. You want to make sure that everybody in a canoe with you, right, is a friend of yours, and not somebody that's going to think twice whether they should pull you out of the water or not. And that's one metaphor I use, and it seems to work with the children. But children are children, and they go through all kinds of phases, but they really love working in the Va'a community. I know when they go down to help out with Hawaii Loa, they just, they don't like the reading and writing stuff, but once they get a hands-on experience, it's just like they light up, and there's just like this connection, like a spiritual connection for some of them. And a lot of the Micronesian children, they don't know the story of Papa Mau, so when they hear what he's done, they're just like, there's this not a misplaced pride, but they're like really proud. And it gives them a sense of Hawaii being a sense of place for them, also. So it's just working, connecting. That's kind of like our hidden agenda, is really connecting the different ethnicities in the pipeline and beyond. I think this whole thing just all ties together, and the canoe is the best, for me, example on how people can work together. Just imagine we're all on a canoe, way out in the deep, and in order for us to survive, we all have to get along and love one another, care for one another, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I think this is a valuable lesson. I want to talk more about the Micronesian connections. I attended a couple of them. The last one was Oceanic Connections, this past year. So could you say more about those kinds of ethnic relations? I have another question for you about the university and those things, but first of all, we start with that, like Waves of Change Conference, Oceanic Connections, Micronesian Connections, how they develop these connections.
Yeah, we know and I think many of us teach in ethnic studies that the most recent ethnic group, immigrant group, that are coming to a country that's sort of different from the majority, often become scapegoats and become the group that is attaching stereotypes and discriminated against. But I don't think it has to be like that. And the best way you can overcome it is to get people to know each other, to work together across generations, across ethnic groups, across disciplines, if we're talking university-wise.
Yeah.
So, but aside from knowing the real history.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I know you mentioned one time if Mao had come to Hawaii on his own for health reasons, he would have been experiencing the same.
Yes.
Lack of employment, difficulties finding appropriate housing, and
like his son
impossibility
now,
of paying for a place to stay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Kahape'a and I were talking earlier before we came up, and she was saying that, a lot of these other islands that she's voyaged to, one thing that was really noticeable to her, there was no homeless there, and we're questioning, what's wrong, what's going on here? Why do we have homeless people? And like for Micronesia, there's a lot of Micronesian people that are homeless here. And so it's just one of those things we have to work towards. I don't know what the answer is right now, but it's interesting to note that, people come here for opportunity, things are supposedly better here, but then they wind up homeless, where living back home would, at least they have shelter, at least they have land, they can go plant something to eat, and they don't have that here.
Yeah. Yeah, but they come here for specific purposes. I mean, the relationship between the United States, and Micronesia, the Marshalls, the Bikini. I mean, so we're talking about like nuclear colonialism, like shall we say, what we call nuclearism. So this is like they come here because the U.S. did something bad to them, Yeah, I mean, so and then like the U.S. reneges on its promises, like financial promises, etc. So that is a problem. So we find them here. So like we start like blaming the victim, I mean, that's the idea. So what I'm thinking about, like the engagement through, the canoe. Is like trying as best we can decolonize our mind from all these things that are quote-unquote American values, and show that actually there are, Pacific Islander values, Hawaiian values that really can bring us together. So could you say more about this, like decolonization of, the brain, of the mind?
I think for me personally, when we sailed to Micronesia, of course we were sailing with Mao, so he was our father, and he wanted to make sure that we were introduced properly to his communities. And what we saw when we spent time there was that there were more similarities between us as Hawaiians and the Micronesians, and their lands, their culture is beautiful. Their traditional clothing is beautiful. All of their handicraft are so beautiful, and we just started to see that there's less differences amongst people. And then when we came home, then we see the Micronesian communities here that aren't looking so healthy and vibrant and happy as they looked when we saw them at home. And so, we're just a small little program, but we're trying to do these little things that we can with our canoe to try and make a little bit of an impact on the youth and the young people, and to try and show not only our appreciation to Mao, but our responsibility as Hawaiians to the Pacific people.
And it was a nice gesture, like, Hawaiians take Papa Mao to Satawal, what was it, 1999?
99,
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing that you folks did for Papa Mao, Kat, you want to tell us more about your particular preparation for the voyage?
So far, I've been attending trainings twice a week at the Polynesian Voyaging Society. And there's a lot of training. There's mental preparedness, there's physical. You know, like Kahape'a mentioned earlier, there's different physical fitness tests that we had to do. And I'm very thankful that I was able to pass all mine. It took me 2 rounds, but, you know, and it's the preparation is mental, spiritual, and physical. Again, being out in the ocean, you have to be ready for anything. And it's not just about being strong, it's about being ocean strong, is what we've been taught. Big difference. You know, it's not about having muscles and brawn and all this kind of stuff. It's just, there's no point if you have all these physical muscles and you don't have any mental muscles, you know. And you have to be able to coordinate everything. And so lately, in fact, tonight in our training, I will be doing a presentation and preparing the crew for Tonga, arriving in Tonga. There's another Tongan crew member. We'll be doing that tonight. As you know, Tonga is the last remaining monarchy in not just Polynesia, but all the Pacific. So there's a lot of, you know, cultural etiquette and stuff that we want, you know, the crew to be as ma'a as possible too. So, you know, PVS comes in. You know, doing the right thing, and that's something they want to do, that they respect each culture. And so that's been really rewarding, actually. A little frustrating at times, you know, doing the administrative part of it, but I know it'll all work out together, and once we're out in the ocean, it should
There's
all go.
always bureaucracy in everything.
Absolutely.
From the Greek and Roman times,
Right.
But this is like something unavoidable. But I just wanted to ask, like, okay, we have a crew, right? And they go on one of the legs or anything of that nature. So how many people are we talking about?
There's usually about 30 to 32 is probably the average, about 15 people on each va'a.
Yeah, very good. And it's interesting also to me in terms of like captains. How many female captains do we have? Like you and Kauai?
I'm just the captain of our small va'a.
Yeah. Well, no, I know, but
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but you are a voyaging captain, right? I mean,
Yeah, so like Kat mentioned earlier, we have the 5 Po navigators, and each one of them will be on board. Sometimes there'll be 2 on board one canoe at one time, but they have committed to be on this worldwide voyage all the way around. So they take turns, and then also when I was sailing, we were joined by 2 of the Cook Island Po navigators. And that was amazing experience to also get to learn from them and gain some of their teachings as well.
so you're having like you know, navigation club of captains across
Well, they
the
also,
Pacific.
the Cook Island captains were trained here by Nainoa.
Okay, there you go.
And they were sanctioned into the Po also by Mao. And so, so they have the same knowledge base, but they've also, you know, when you sail in the Southern Hemisphere, it's really different. And we were just at the planetarium last night with some of the crew, looking at the stars and getting ready for the navigation. And the Southern Hemisphere is like a completely different map if you haven't been there before. So.
And because I wanted to ask something you mentioned before, like the Hawaiian compass and the Micronesian compass. I mean, beyond the technicalities of it, well, what are the like differences in something like you just mentioned now?
So the Hawaiian compass is based off of Papa Mau's compass. And so in Papa Mau's compass, there's 32 points. And on the Hawaiian compass, there's 32 houses. In Mau's compass, his points are not all equally spaced. And that was a big challenge, I think, that Nainoa had early on. And so when he developed the Hawaiian compass,
well, Nainoa did.
Nainoa created the modern Hawaiian compass. And so it's an amazing tool to use. And, you know, I really got to see it in play when I was sailing down there. And it's an amazing tool. It works. You know, but it is based on Mau's teachings. And so even though it's a modern construct created by Nainoa, it's very ancient.
Well, that's good. That shows you like how cultures develop over
Exactly.
time,
It's a
etc.
great example of
And
development.
the old one is, the Papamau compass is Pacific compass, and the new Hawaiian compass, Nainoa's, is also a Pacific compass, and
Correct.
it's like how cultures relate to one another, how they learn from each other, and go beyond that. Yeah. So, Ulla, I wanted to ask you something about the program, civic engagement, and especially interesting is the, navigation part, So how does the university relate to this thing, and what kind of resources are they putting into like expanding this kind of, learning through community engagement and civic engagement?
Let me speak for the College of Social
Yeah,
Sciences.
right.
There is a very strong support in integrating, working with the community, and being that it's a best practice nationally and internationally recognized. It's a good investment, I think. We have the opportunity to create programs, which is part of what I'm doing. And I'm also working with faculty, suggesting ways to incorporate service learning and other forms of civic engagement into the curriculum. We have a brochure, very, very short little one, that lists a number of programs that we are trying to organize them. We have many, many sites that we are working with and many programs. And kind of the transcending and very meaningful to me is when they come together in various ways. Right now, for instance, CAT's areas are education, the Palola Pipeline in particular, and Pacific connections. And as part of preparing for her voyage, she's also working with schools, and we made sure, of course, that the schools in the Palola Pipeline are part of that. So she is giving lectures at the schools about the Polynesian Voyaging Society and the voyage as such. But we are also later going to give the students she's talking to a chance to meet Kahape'a and her crew and work with them to get a different experiential understanding.
Right.
The college students come in as the bridge. They are being trained to work with younger students. So they will eventually help Kahape'a host the younger students when they come out.
Yeah. Well, Kahape'a, like in terms of future plans, maybe intermediate plans for the Kānehūnāmoku project. So any ideas? Where would you be going based on what we have been talking about?
Well, we just recently got our nonprofit status, so we're completely on our course here. Eventually, we do have plans to just keep expanding our programs, reach out to more communities, more students, more adult learners. We want to definitely keep our maritime training program going. We've seen a lot of success in the first year. But eventually, we want to have a school where students of all ethnicities would be welcome to come and earn a high school diploma in voyaging and in maritime studies.
Yeah, because with the Hawaiian charter schools and your role in it, especially with the VA program, they really educate all kinds of students. You don't need to be Hawaiian.
Right.
Yeah, and so on. So, but you want to expand that, right? And so what would then the relationship be between the charter schools and your Kānehūnāmoku?
Those are all
academy?
things that are still really in the air.
Right.
I don't know if we would be a charter school, maybe we'd be a private school, maybe part of the Department of Education.
Okay.
It's just kind of our long pipe dream that we're slowly getting enough experience and momentum, I think, to get there.
Because I'm thinking it might be like you'll be doing something here, the charter schools here, So you might be like devising your own compass, educational
Correct.
compass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And give students choice and also a career path that they could be successful in.
Yeah. And Kat, Ulla was mentioning like your participation in the pipeline project and so forth, and like you've been giving lectures, etc. Could you say something more about those particular lectures and also how the students are relating to it, and what do you see like difference between like before these lectures and or before this program and after this program, and so far as students are concerned or young kids?
Okay. As crew member of the Worldwide Voyage, we get to adopt a school. So obviously I'll be adopting the schools in the pipeline, including Kamaki High School. And so I was able to bring along another crew member, and we just do a presentation talking about the purpose of the voyage. And so far we've seen one school in Kalihi that reached out to me. Just to see the kids' face light up, like, wow, they didn't know this. And, we asked the question at the end, how many of you would like to do something like this or be involved? And almost all of them raised their hand. I'd like to, I think my future becomes defined more and more as I get involved. And I'd like to perpetuate and support the Voyaging and Maritime Society as best as I can, especially amongst Pacific Islanders. And when I say Pacific Islanders, I mean including Hawaii.
Yeah.
And, for our younger generation. And it's like Kahape'a said, they can even find career opportunities in there, that this just gets so big, it's just normal. It's not something that's foreign or new anymore, but it's just part of Hawaii, local society on a normal basis, not like just an exclusive club for,
that's wonderful. And to me also, like, what is important is what I'm gonna reiterate this is the contribution that Pacific Islanders, Hawaiians, and the Voyaging really the contribution to people across ethnic and racial and national lines. So it's not only Pacific Islanders, but everyone else. So this is like, it seems to me, a wonderful thing that we could continue building upon.
Yes.
And publicize maybe through this program others, and also through a book like this, right? Value of Hawaii, second edition. Or Value Hawaii 2, because there's a Value of Hawaii 1. So these are important considerations, and I hope that you would also think about writing about your experiences, etc. And then we can use them in classes and so forth, yeah?
Absolutely.
And even not only in classes at the UH, but the young kids that you've been talking to, you're working with, yeah? You're Kahape'a too, right? So Ulla, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned talking with students and engaging different students in any number of programs that you have. So could you say something more about the kind of students or classes that really participate in those things, so we can have perhaps more classes and more students doing this? And what would you say to them to encourage them to do so?
We have at the institution of higher education level, that's what you're thinking about, right?
Yeah.
We actually, the work that we are doing is bridging social and natural sciences and supporting incorporating traditional knowledge, particularly in this area. And that is something that has caught national attention. We are working with an organization or an initiative called Science Education for a New Civic Engagement and Responsibility. And they're looking to making Hawaii an innovation state because of the strong connection to traditional knowledge. So that's very exciting for us. What that particular organization is focusing on is researching, answering taking action for big questions, and international relations, ethnic relations, climate change, all those are really big questions. And to engage students at all levels in learning and maybe coming up with solutions to some of those big questions is a very effective way of teaching and very appealing to faculty from many different levels. So, of course, undergraduate students in service learning will have an opportunity to do this work. But we also work with graduate students and PhD candidates and faculty. New areas for research are opening up.
Yeah, very good, because like there's this notion, that science, technology, engineering, and math, what is called STEM, and you work with this, is one thing, and then there is these things that are called cultural stuff, you know, whatever it is, the canoe and all that. But actually, you can teach science, technology, engineering, and math through the canoe program. And again, it shows like the power of indigenous cultures in like creating those kinds of relationships between all those fields of knowledge, you know, culture, etc. To me, I cannot see like engineering and math without like looking at cultures and how they can contribute to culture and how culture can contribute to them. So like you can teach math through the canoe, right? I mean, the compass and all of that. You can teach, like you mentioned, like some students would become engineers or tugboat operators, you know, so technical kind of thing, captains, etc. The students that you teach like begin to have this better understanding of math, for instance. Any examples? Not only math, but other things, engineering.
I think especially for you know, some of our students who are struggling in the academic arena, when they come to the canoe and then they get their hands on, and then you start to explain to them, once you can hook them with the canoe and sailing, then it's like, okay, now let's do some nautical charting. And then they're, you know, at first they're a little hesitant, but once they learn how to use the parallel rulers and the divider, and then next thing you know, they're charting courses to go all over the world, and they're applying, you know, math skills, algebra, and, you know, even some trigonometry in there. And then it's amazing to see how much they feel more confident in what they know. And then hopefully, you know, we can translate that into classroom success as well. So we have seen that over the years, especially in the charter schools. And we'll continue to work to develop more STEM-focused curriculum.
Yeah. We have 1 minute left, so Kat, any final
I
thoughts?
wanted to piggyback on what Kahape'a was saying. You know, I think there's a misconception about STEM just being a modern knowledge. You know, a lot of indigenous culture is STEM-based. There is science involved, technology. I mean, if you think of the Hawaiian Ahupua'a system, I mean, that's the fish ponds. I mean, major engineering there, the lo'is and how they're calculated, you count them.
And the streams
the
going down.
streams. I mean, that's STEM right there.
Right. Yeah.
And that's all I wanted to say.
So we have to stem this misunderstanding from its roots.
Decolonize it.
Yeah, because I think it's like very important to show the relationship. I mean, it's wonderful. And so we flat out of time, I think. So thank you very much, Kahape'a, Kat, Ulla, for coming over. And hopefully we can do more things to encourage more, you know, these kinds of relationships among the Pacific through the Ba'a. Thank you very much. Mahalo nui loa, and see you next month. Aloha.